So, I don't really know where to start with this. I mean, I could start with how much I love the character of Spider-Man. I could spill out my undying love for this character and talk about the first comic I ever read as a kid being a Spider-Man comic, and even talk about how I grew up with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I could go on and on about all of that, and how Spider-Man changed my life, and how close I hold this character to my heart. But no matter how much I talk about my love for the character, and the fact that I went into this movie really wanting to like it, there's gonna be people out there that are just gonna skip past that and skip past what I have to say and only hear this part. Spider-Man Far From Home is not a good movie.
He's a dead man.
Spider-Man Far From Home is the newest Spidey film and the newest MCU film closing off Phase 3. It had quite a bit of shoes to fill, and while it does deliver on some standard fun moments here and there and it has great performances, Far From Home fails at being a good Spider-Man film, a good post-Endgame film, a good teen romance road trip film, and just a good film overall. Straight off the bat, I did not like the way they treated the aftermath of Endgame in this movie. They treat it as this joke right at the start, and then they completely forget about it. And the reason why I have a problem with it is because, well, the emotional high and the dramatic weight that Endgame left on, you'd think that they'd continue that through here and show the dramatic weight of it all. But they completely mishandle it, leaving a bad taste in the mouth. It's just told as this joke. It's not even a funny joke. And that's how I felt about the comedy in this film. The comedy falls completely flat. I did not laugh once. And it's because the film has an over-reliance on its running gags. And these running gags just aren't funny. It gets to the point where these running gags just don't feel like running gags after a while. They feel like lazy, half-assed attempts at humor. At least 95% of the jokes in this movie are direct copies from earlier on in the film or rehashed jokes from Homecoming. And it's constantly repeated throughout the entire movie, whether it's someone walking in on Peter changing, Ned's random relationship, Ned yelling out random shit to save Peter's ass or to get Peter's ass in a pickle, the Flash's annoying sort of bully jokes to Peter, the goofy stupid teachers, the over-exaggerated awkward teenage stuff, etc, etc. It's like, okay, we get it. The comedy isn't creative. These running gags just aren't funny and they keep repeating these running gags to the point where it feels lazy. And all of this flat comedy, it seems to be the driving force of everything in this entire film, especially in the first half. The first half of the film has no idea what it wants to be or what it wants to go for. It's struggling to balance being an awkward teen romance road trip film and also being a Spider-Man film. And it's failing at both individually. And the first act alone is so atrocious. It is so rushed. There's no establishment to anything in that first act. Things just happen randomly to get a laugh and nothing actually has any build-up in the story or the characters. And so it's really choppy in its presentation. But then you have the entire first half of the film, which is clunky. The story feels like it's meandering. It's just all of these teenagers traveling in Europe doing and saying the same old awkward teen stuff over and over again. And I'm not saying they can't lean into that teen stuff because that's a part of who Peter is. I'm just saying that there's no development in the story, the characters, and their relationships in that first half. Nothing sticks to the wall because there's no development. There's no relatability with these characters. The filmmakers think that just having all of these non-characterized teenagers do and say the same old over-exaggerated awkward stuff over and over again makes the characters in the story relatable, charming, and funny. But that's not the case. And so overall, that entire first half is as stale as bread on Fat Thor's belly. I heard myself. Nothing actually happens in that entire first half that is vital to the overall film. Like, why did we need that subplot? Why did we need that scene involving that guy who walks in on Peter changing in front of the lady, and then Peter orders an accidental kill on him? Like, why did we need that scene? It doesn't add anything to the film. It's there for comedic purposes, but it's not funny and it doesn't affect the actual story itself. So why is that scene? Why is that character? Why is that subplot in the movie? Why? There's nothing actually progressing the story forward and even the plot forward in that first half. It's not until the characters arrive in Prague where the plot and the story actually kicks in and starts progressing forward. But while the second half is an improvement, it's still problematic. And it's all due to the writing of the characters and how they're mishandled in the story with the choices that are made. So the villain of the film, the Elementals, jokes. Mysterio, big surprise. Not really. If you know anything about Mysterio, if you know anything about Spider-Man in general, then you know where this film will go. It's a pretty predictable movie. It was awesome seeing Mysterio in a Spidey film. I love the character from the comics, and I thought that the way they brought him to screen here with his look, his design, his technological powers, and with Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, it was all well done. And the way they handle his illusion fight scenes were just amazingly fun. It is straight out of the comics and it felt refreshing to see it on screen. But I wish I got way more from him as a character. I wish I got more scenes between Peter and Quentin. Because in the film, Quentin's supposed to come off like this father figure for Peter after Tony Stark. But it's never really explored in that way. And just because Quentin looks like Tony Stark for one shot doesn't mean he's a father figure. And it felt like the filmmakers were sort of manipulating viewers with that emotion. An example of this manipulation is when Peter Parker has Tony's sunglasses, something that he should hold dear to him, something that is a major problem if in the wrong hands. And after knowing Mysterio for like 3 scenes, he just gives Mysterio the sunglasses. And audiences were fine with that. And that's how I know it manipulated viewers, and that's how I know it is lazy storytelling. Also, I never felt like I got any development or dramatic weight from Mysterio. He gets a backstory here, but I didn't like that backstory. I think it would have been so much more better if his backstory tied into the events of Endgame, since this is a post-Endgame movie. And it would have been so much more effective to see these two humans, Peter and Quentin, having their own ways of dealing with the aftermath of Endgame, so they have that strong connection together, and it would have added so much more to their scenes together as well. But the route they went with his character's backstory, I just wasn't a fan of, and I thought it was poorly executed. Like, Jake Gyllenhaal is just blurting out exposition to the audience. Literally to the audience. Because random characters are just getting introduced with these black and white photos of them popping up on screen from other MCU movies. And it's so lazy and random in execution. It's poor storytelling. And I'm not saying that Mysterio is a bad villain. I think that Jake Gyllenhaal delivers a great charismatic performance, and there are a few aspects to the character that elevates him. But it's just, he has no development or dramatic weight. This then leads me to my biggest problem with the film. Peter Parker / Spider-Man. It's not Tom Holland's fault. He is great as the web slinger. He is great as the dorky teenager. He is fantastic in this role. It's just the writing that surrounds his character. There are scenes in this movie where I was like, fuck, Tom Holland is giving it his all. And I just wish that the writers and the director were on that same wavelength. They don't fully understand the character of Peter Parker and the conflict within him. They don't understand the fundamentals of his character when it comes to consequence and responsibility. Consequence and responsibility is a big part of Peter's world. And yet, I still feel like none of that is brought to the table here once again with this MCU Spider-Man. They mishandle it. They play it so damn safe with the writing of Peter Parker, the directing, certain situations, and the action scenes. You might think that it has consequence and dramatic weight, but really, It sets up the consequence and then it ditches it immediately afterwards, taking routes with the storytelling where it plays it so damn safe, or it just ditches the consequence for that flat comedy. And so there's no real consequence. I never felt like there were any stakes, especially in the action. The illusion fight scenes between Spider-Man and Mysterio are pretty damn dope, but the rest of the action is pretty much just standard fun action. It's definitely better than the action in Homecoming. The director does make the most of the European locations, mapping the geography of it out well. But other than that, the action is pretty empty. There's nothing to them due to the direction and the lack of development with the characters and the story. And in every action sequence in this movie, it always cuts to other people, like the teenagers saying and doing dumb shit, especially in that third act fight. And when it does that, the main action with Spidey loses some of its fun and momentum and engagement. I lost most of my engagement with Peter Parker in this film because he's mishandled, especially his character arc in the film. His character arc is essentially him feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders with everybody expecting him to be the next Iron Man. And that's such a big responsibility. And he just wants a break from all the superhero stuff. He wants a break because he lost his mentor, Tony Stark. And we get that in the one scene at the start where the reporter just yells at him, "How do you feel about being the next Iron Man?" And then Spider-Man gets up out of there, sits on a rooftop, and there's this graffitied Iron Man right next to him, and he looks sad. And then after that scene, it's completely forgotten about because Peter is focused on getting MJ. And there's never another moment like that until the plane scene between Happy and Peter. But Peter's entire arc is him trying to steer away from the whole Iron Man Jr. persona and learn not to be the next Iron Man but be the first Spider-Man. He has to come to that realization. And there's a scene in this film between Happy and Peter where they're pouring out their feelings to one another on a plane, and it's in that scene where Peter Parker grows as a character. He comes to the realization that he doesn't have to be the next Iron Man. He just has to be himself and learn to take in that responsibility. Happy even says to him, "Don't do what Tony would do what you would do." So what happens after that scene? Well, they play AC/DC while Peter Parker makes a high-tech suit using Tony's technology, doing the exact same thing that Tony Stark would do. Why? Why would you have a moment where Peter Parker finally stands up and steers away from the whole Iron Man Jr. persona to just be himself, and then immediately right after take it all the way back to the first Iron Man film? It completely contradicts his entire character arc. There's not even a moment after that scene, no breathing moment where Peter Parker grows as a character to correct that. There's that moment where Peter taps into his Spidey sense to fight against Mysterio's illusion, which is really cool and fun. But Peter saying, "Come on, Peter Tingles," it takes away from some of the seriousness in that moment. And still, I never felt like there was any growth with the character. So at the end of the movie, Peter Parker is still the same person he was at the start of the film. The only thing that's changed is that he's less sad, and the fact that his whole character arc is him realizing that he has to be himself and to become the first Spider-Man, it's kind of the exact same character arc in Homecoming. So he's just repeating himself. There's no real growth or change in his character. I just don't know who this MCU Peter Parker is. I don't even think that the director and the writers know. And the fact that I can't even get behind Peter's main goal in the film to get MJ is just depressing to me. Sure, the chemistry between Zendaya and Tom Holland, it has its moments, but their relationship, it isn't developed. It isn't even established. Their time together is very limited, and so it doesn't solidify the foundation between them where I care about their relationship and I care about Peter's journey to get the girl. I also have a lot of questions, like when did Peter start to like MJ? Definitely not in Homecoming because he was still hung up on Liz. Definitely not in Infinity War because he was in space. And definitely not in Endgame because they were both dead. And definitely not after Endgame and in this movie because Peter was dealing with a major grief. So when? And why does he like MJ? We don't actually know. And the whole movie revolves around Peter wanting to get with MJ. And my lack of investment into that really brought it down. I don't even know anything about this MJ. The only thing I know about her is that she's awkward. She's a teenager, so she has to be awkward in certain situations because the script requires it. There's nothing else to her character. And that's how I feel about the majority of the other characters in the film. There's nothing to them. I don't know anything about these characters and what makes them them, and what makes their relationship with Peter special. The actors might be trying their best and giving it their all, but it's the writing surrounding their characters that really brings it down. Let's talk about the mid-credit scene because it definitely gets me excited for the next Spidey flick, but I have a problem with it. Why didn't they just make that mid-credit scene the ending of the film? Because it literally takes place seconds after the actual end of the film. So they could have just made that mid-credit scene the ending. And everything that defines Peter Parker as Spider-Man, that mid-credit scene delivers on that consequence. That consequence that is missing throughout the entire film. So making the mid-credit scene the ending would have added so much more to the movie, and it would have added so much more to Mysterio's speech about people believing what they want to believe. So they should have just made that mid-credit scene the ending. But now it's just a mid-credit scene. It's not actually a part of the movie, so I can't see it as an actual positive for the film. And the more I think about it, the more I think that this entire movie was just all set up for that mid-credit scene for future movies. And that's it. But don't get me wrong, the mid-credit scene, it definitely gets me excited for the next Spidey film because of what it means for Peter Parker. So I'm definitely excited for it, but for right now, I'm not excited about this movie here. It just fell completely flat for me. And I am majorly critical towards Spider-Man movies because I hold the character so close to my heart, but I really do think that this movie fails at being a good Spider-Man film, a good post-Endgame film, and just a good film overall. And I don't hate the movie, I just think it's fine, I guess. I don't know, the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. But a lot of people will enjoy this, a lot of people will rave about this. If you liked it, if you loved it, then that's great. I wish I was in the majority, but I'm not. So overall, Far From Home is a film that has some standard fun moments here and there. It has great performances all around, but it's wrapped up in a very poor film that has a faulty first half, poor development in story and characters, flat comedy, it executes some of its storytelling choices in lazy ways, it mishandles the events of Endgame, it mishandles the consequence that surrounds Peter Parker, while also mishandling the character arc of Peter Parker by contradicting itself. And that is why Spider-Man Far From Home is not a good movie. Okie dokie, guacamole. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you guys like this video and you want to see more, click subscribe and I'll see you later.